we're back, and you are back asking for more money. And if I recall correctly, at a May 26, 2022 meeting, this bond commission was assured that there would be no further requests for additional state funding. So I would like to ask those present representing the Port Authority to explain why we're back here today. And I won't demand anyone's children's lives this time, I promise.
Mr. Corrs.
Morning, Representative David Corris, Chair of the Board, joined by Ulysses Hammond, Executive Director. Appreciate not referencing the children this time. So, when we were before you over a year ago, we presented based on the best available information that we had at that time. And at that time, with the progress we were making and the testing we had done, we were confident that we had the resources available. Over the following 15 months, we did encounter some unforeseen conditions that we weren't anticipating. It's largely due to what we call deep obstructions. These are boulders or rock ledge or peaks in bedrock that are 60, 70, 80 feet or more below the water line. And so we had done some probing, and we had trend lines that showed us where we expected these subsurface conditions to be, but we didn't find everything. And there were some obstructions that we just didn't anticipate. And so getting through those has been complicated, and it requires a variety of measures. In some instances, it requires digging them out and moving them if they're accessible. In some, it requires drilling through them. In others, it requires anchoring piles to them. What I can say to anticipate sort of the next question being, how can we have greater confidence today? We are much further along in the project. As I think folks are well aware, about 70% of the facility has been completed and handed over to our private partners. The first turbine components were actually delivered yesterday or Wednesday of this week, marking operations of the facility. What's different today than any previous time, we've gone through multiple contract amendments with our construction manager, and there's always been risk, and there's always been the potential for overages, and we've held contingencies for that. But what's different in this current contract amendment is that all the scope items but 3, and there are literally hundreds of scope items, all of them but 3 have a final guaranteed maximum price that is not to exceed. And so there is zero potential of additional overages for any of those scope items except for a very narrow negotiated 3. For those 3, we have an allowance of about $3.25 million in our next contract amendment, and then a contingency of about $6.5 million. And we are comfortable, and based on the recommendations that we've received from our construction administrator and from our other engineering and technical advisors, that is an appropriate level of contingency given that limited number of scope items for which there remains some level of risk. The other thing that has changed, which I think folks are well aware from the news over the last several months, is we did go back to our private partners, and we did reopen the negotiation related to the harbor development agreement, and we did make sure that they have additional skin in the game. And so for this final contract amendment with our contractor, which will total $47.5 million, we and Ørsted and Eversource are splitting that 50-50, $23.75 million each, and then we're carrying an additional contingency. That brings their contribution to an improvement of a public facility to $100 million. And that's something that we're pretty proud of, that we've managed to get private entities to invest a third of the capital cost of upgrading this facility that we will own and operate for generations to come. And we have a lifetime of years to recoup our investment in this public facility. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what's changed since last time and why we're back to you today.
Thank you, and I accept that, and I will take at face value what you have assured me and everyone else sitting on this commission today. I suppose my deeper frustration results from one, that this is, as you maintain, the last in a series of requests for increased funding. And granted, those private partners are coming back to the table, but they are also the first who will be repaid from this additional contribution they're making should state pier generate more funds before the state taxpayers. And again, I would be less frustrated if I had not sat at this very commission and heard time after time, I believe 3 or 4 requests for additional funding. I wish someone, and there were people who addressed this before you, Mr. Kouros, had the honesty to admit that we as a state have never tackled a project this large. This is our best estimate. Can we guarantee we won't come back? No. And I suspect there are people sitting on this commission who wished that they had not had to sit here and listen to repeated requests. Because at the end of the day, everyone sitting here is deemed to be and hope to be a good steward of taxpayer dollars. And if I'm sitting here in Berlin or somewhere else and I'm saying, that's $200 million of state funding, when our nonprofits are struggling for funds, when our schools and municipalities need more money, and granted, our private partners have put up funds, but they're also going to make hundreds of millions of dollars from this offshore wind project. Why shouldn't they put some money in that's going to allow them to stage in a cost-effective manner the windmill, turbines that they're going to build? So I think that's where my deep-rooted frustration comes. And as I say, I will take at face value that you will not be coming back to request more money. But I do find that this could have been handled more appropriately, and I am not even going to discuss other issues relating that everyone in this room probably knows only too well related to the Port Authority. So I thank you for your reassurances today. I will regrettably, to be consistent, be a no again on this, because I think there needs to be accountability. I think we as a state need to look more closely at all our quasi-publics to ensure that there is transparency, there is accountability, and there is, at the end of the day, someone who is going to say, the buck stops here and I'm taking responsibility for this. So thank you, Governor, for indulging me.